guys, welcome to the first video in the Woodsman's Finest Axe series. What I want to show you in the first video is how to make one of these axe handles, and in the second video I'm gonna go ahead and gonna hang this axe head, or half the axe. I think it's a great way to start this series by just showing you how to make your own carving axe handle, what materials I use and what kind of tools you need to do so. And I actually need to have this axe hafted anyways, because it's gonna be part of the review series, where I'm gonna take care of all kind of different axes from different makers, different parts in the world so you guys get a little bit of a hands-on review in case you want to commit to a really nice carving axe. I apologize for all the background noises. I'm in the middle of Bobcaygeon, Ontario. Beautiful little town, but very busy. So yeah. I'm not trying to create the illusion of me being somewhere in the wilderness, so I hope you guys can still hear everything.
Okay, here we go, folks. I gotta do this like a voiceover because the autofocus was just too annoying. Here we go. So these are the tools that I'm gonna be using. It's my hand-forged carving axe. I'm gonna be making a video about a draw knife, of course a template of an axe handle I love, and a Sharpie. I'm gonna be having my Japanese folding saw and a Sloyd knife. So when it comes to materials for axe handles, there is a lot of debate going on. What I'm gonna be using here, what you see here, is a flat sawn piece of white ash, which is an offcut from one of my canoe paddles that I hand carve with an axe and a draw knife. So these lend themselves perfectly to carving axe handles. As far as materials go, there's a lot of debate going on. We're talking about flat sawn versus sometimes people even prefer quarter sawn pieces, different woods, if the hardwood, like in this piece here, the darker wood, should be used or not. My philosophy about these things is quite simple. We're talking about a carving axe head of 1 to 2 pounds that are going to be swinging mostly with one hand, and I have been making axe handles from a lot of different materials, and as long as they're carved with the grain, I haven't had any problems with that. Now, given that I'm not swinging a 6-pound head with like a, I don't know, 35-inch handle, okay, so this is a totally different ball game then. So very important for me is the shape of the handle, as far as facets and kind of an octagon shape. It's a handle philosophy that I've been using for a while, not only on my axes but as well on my hook knives and on my all other knives. I just find them to blend best into my hands and don't give me fatigue, blisters or the like, just because they don't want to turn in my hand all the time, so I don't have to grip them harder, which would resulted in my past in inflamed joints in my elbow and wrist, etc. Another important thing, as you can see here, is the bigger pommel on the end of the axe handle, which just gives a nice little counterweight to the head. So now when it comes to the outlining or the tracing of the template, I'm just trying to put the grain of the wood as straight as possible into my handle. Now, it is true that if you would use a quarter sawn piece of wood here, you would have a lot of grain running out, and that's basically the problem. So as far as some quarter sawn pieces of wood, I personally think they might do better with just perfectly straight handles. But in this case here, it's a flat sawn piece of wood anyway, so we don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I just try to put it as straight as possible in there. Of course, it would be, in an ideal world, I would probably have a bent branch that is perfectly following my axe handle design, just like in a bent piece of wood that I can make a nice spoon out of. But I'm really happy with this, and it has worked out perfectly for me so far. So here I'm just tracing my template. So at this point, I bring in my beloved Tajima Japanese folding saw that I'm talking a little bit more about in one of my toolkit videos, if you wanna just browse my channel. I use it here to make, just like I was just pointing out there, I make some stop cuts at the transition of grain directions, or rather of me axing from different directions into the grain. It just helps reducing split risk, and I also, like right there, I'm using it to get rid of some end grain, which is just way more convenient with a saw than an axe, especially in dry ash. I could use the bandsaw for these things. I have one standing right behind me in Jeff's shop, but I like doing it by hand, elbow grease, and like just doing these things by hand. Just way more rewarding in my opinion. So yeah, this is how the saw comes in the beginning of the process, just to help out a little bit. So here we go. From here on, I basically axe the handle into rough shape using my Viking style 8th century shipbuilding axe that I forged after an axe I saw up in Roskilde in Denmark. I love this axe, and it's really great for heavier stock removal on this dry wood. So I'm axing towards my stop cuts here, if you can see, and it might be a little bit weird seeing my lips move on the video, but I'm actually explaining, but the autofocus sound is just so annoying. It can be a little bit tricky to axe along the lines on an axe handle like that, because you have a little bit of end grain axing to do and stuff, but take your time, just try to get towards the lines. You don't have to axe all the way to the lines, and whenever you can, just utilize these stop cuts with some kind of splitting like I just did. Keep your fingers out of the way, and yeah, that's basically what's happening here. So as you can see, the whole axe handle takes rough shape, and I'm just working on the end grain of the pommel here a little bit. It's always good to keep aiming along if you're axing 90 degrees to the line, and as I said, don't try to get all the way down to the line. Just don't keep yourself a couple of millimeters, because we have the draw knife after this, and it can be a little bit more precise, especially with these with this very, very dry and hard ash. So yeah, at this point it gets a little bit finer and trickier, and just utilize as many axing techniques as you can, as I'm just trying to explain there. Can be a little bit tricky, so what I'm doing there is I'm basically taking the corners, so like rather the edges off first to form kind of a ridge line in the middle, so I can then axe in the middle a little bit easier the pommel of the axe handle. But to be fair, I could have done that with the draw knife as well, probably a little bit safer and a little bit easier, but I'm still trying to do as much as I can with the axe. I love using it, so yeah, that's what's happening here. So we're off to the next step here, folks. I'm using a spoon mule that Jeff built for making these, but you can as well use a padded vise or just some clamps that you can clamp to your work table. I mean, recently I've made a whole paddle just with a couple of C-clamps. You can always make do. I'm using a 8-inch slightly curved Ohio King vintage draw knife that's laminated steel. It's knife sharp. It's absolutely razor sharp, and I really love it for these kind of things. It's a beautiful tool. What I'm basically doing here is I'm just working with the bevel down myself as close to the lines as possible, or as close to the lines as I want. So I look at the lines, but I don't entirely trust the lines, because they're always a little bit wider than the knife, the template that I was using, and I still try to really work with the piece of wood. So I keep aiming along the wood and just, you know, just not entirely trusting. It sometimes happens that the whole piece flies out of the spoon mule if it's not, you know, like a little spoon basically, and the cheeks of this one are a little bit worked off. So it's always good to have one of those leather aprons. Making quite a few of these lately from horse leather, because they just give you this extra bit of protection, and instead of a bodger's bib and everything, you can just have a whole apron protecting your legs and your chest and everything. So you just see me working along here. I'm always trying to use my whole body for these things. I keep my elbows tight, so I'm not really working my arms, but I'm trying to work my whole body, my core. Might sound a little bit weird to say something like that when it comes to carving and crafting, but I think especially when you do something like this every day and sometimes a whole day, then it's just smart to be efficient with your resources. So yeah, here's just my process. I'm basically working down to the lines and that one dimension, and then we're gonna go next to working the side profile. So I want to point two things out here. First of all, I'm keeping the part that's hafted on the axe, the shoulder on the top, as wide and as straight as possible to accommodate whatever axe handles I want to haft, in case I don't know yet. And second of all, I keep the bevel of the draw knife down so it doesn't dig into the wood, but comes out of the wood nicely, especially in curves. So it's obviously the next day. I ran out of battery and out of time, and I just switched to my bodger's bib. So yep, let's take it from here. So here in the next step, I basically use my sloyd knife, but you can as well use a crooked knife or rasps and files if you want to, but I personally like keeping it to carving. So I use my sloyd knife here first of all to clean little transitions that were too fine to get them right just with the draw knife. So that's the first thing I do, cleaning up the circumference to my liking. The second thing I'm gonna be doing is I'll facet all the corners. So right now I basically have cross section a square piece of wood, and I want to take the corners off either into an octagonal, but you can as well chamfer the edges several times until you basically get a rounded handle to your liking with an oval cross section with a couple of facets that just give you a better purchase and a better connection to your hand, which is obviously not perfectly oval on the inside. So I find if you shoot for perfectly round handles, then there's a lot of extra material kind of bunched up inside of your hand that then causes blisters and all the problems that we know about. So as you can see here, I'm just utilizing all kind of different carving methods that I'm also teaching in a distinguished video on my channel if you want to browse that again. So I'm going over all the classic ways or the basic ways of using a sloyd knife for carving like that, as in you can see here utilizing my whole body basically from my knees to my abs, bracing the piece here like I would a spoon, using my second hand for pushing, all very safe and very powerful carving methods. This piece of wood was a little bit slim maybe to begin with, but believe it or not, actually on the finished axe, we're gonna see that in the next video, it feels really well. I'm not having the biggest hands, and I really like having a good feeling for where the axe blade is orientated, so I kind of like a very slim oval handle. A part that you didn't really see well in the draw knife video was how I basically made a little bit of a pommel swell or palm swell by just taking a little bit material off the lateral sides from the pommel down towards the shoulders, but keeping the shoulders still nice and wide, so there's a little bit of a taper happening in the handle towards basically the middle of the handle from both sides. This is like a very individual thing. You can just figure out the way you like it, and you can play around with that a lot. So yeah, here you just see me using one of my laminated Mora blades that I like using for these kind of rougher things. Yeah, just to put kind of a finish onto the axe handle. So at this point, I'm bracing the spoon against my sternum, and I'm just following the edges of the handle, basically chamfering it and trying to follow the grain direction. It can be a little bit tricky, especially if the more curves you put in the axe handle originally, you have to follow these curves in grain directions, of course. But after a while, you get quite a good feeling for that. What I still do, since there is no lines anymore, and lines are just kind of a rough guide, I still make sure that I aim along the handle a lot, and I'm checking out the curves a lot, if everything is in proportion for my liking and for my kind of instinct in a way. So yeah, I'm using this method of carving towards myself like this a lot. I find it very, very efficient. Very often I brace, like in this case I have it braced against my sternum, of course. I often brace the other side into my knee pit, kind of like crossing one of my legs over. You find your own methods here, especially when you carve dry wood. You want to be efficient with your strength, of course, as well. You want to be safe. Keep your knife sharp all the time, especially when you carve dry wood, so you don't have to muscle things too much. But yeah, basically I'm just creeping up on the shape that I like and taking away pieces here and there, and yeah, just slowly working myself to the finished product. So here I'm just once again emphasizing on how important it is to get a good feel on the axe handle with the faceted corners or chamfered corners, or just a more round style with like small facets, however you like it. But so you gotta be honest with yourself how you're using an axe. Like, of course I'm sometimes going all the way back on the handle for heavier blows, but most of the time I'm choking up somewhat in the middle of this curve. And it's also about the balance point, because most axes are balanced right behind the head. Some axes that I find even better are maybe balanced 2 inches down from the head, which means where I have my hand there in the middle of the curve is pretty much actually balanced, which doesn't make me feel like I have too much of a head heavy axe, which is a lot less fatiguing and a lot less straining for my wrists and my elbow and everything. But anyhow, I realized I'm holding it up there. It was a little bit wide for me, so I just shaved it down there, because yep, this is just a custom-made axe handle to my hand, so you have all the possibilities in the world there. And another thing I wanted to point out, as you just saw me weighing the axe handle in my hand there, I'm representing a Japanese swordsmanship school called Toyamaryu Iaido in Austria, and I've learned all of this handling of a sword in Japan during my stays there, my travels there, and competitions and whatnot. And if you're handling a 1 to 2 kilogram sword, axe, whatever it is, over an extended period of time, there goes a lot of thinking into what you're actually doing. And I find that my pinky is, or that's at least what we say in handling the katana, the pinky is the most important finger on your hand. So yeah, just maybe give it a thought, using your pinky, your ring finger, how much you use them, and just give it a little bit of a try, I would say.
Okay guys, so let's wrap it up. That's it for my axe handle carving tutorial. So what we used was an axe, a draw knife, a saw, and a normal sloyd knife, or like a carving knife. You can as well use a crooked knife, you can use a spoon mule or a vise, but you can also only use a knife for the whole process, basically axing it out using a carving axe, and then just your sloyd knife. So there's a lot of different ways of getting to this result. Important is that you just play around a little bit with shapes that you like. It's also depending on the axe head, of course, the weight of the axe head and everything, how big you keep the pommel in the back as a counterweight. All these things are really just for your own experimentation and for your own consideration, but I just wanted to go over the crude steps of how I work myself down from a blank, a branch, or a piece of board that's flat sawn with the right kind of grain direction in it to this kind of finished shape. So some of you, it might look a little bit unfinished with those facets, but for somebody who's using these every single day, you're gonna see the benefits of these very, very soon. So I want to wrap it up with this and start filming the next video where I'm hafting my X head in this. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you like this video and give me a thumbs up. There is more videos on my channel, so just browse for tutorials, for reviews, about knives, about axes, about my own toolkit, and of course a couple of tutorials about spoon carving and making other things. Yeah, there's a lot more to come, hopefully in the very close future, and I appreciate the support and that you took your time today for watching. I hope you had a good time, and I'm gonna see you next time. Cheers.